Father John, welcome to Beyond the Lecture. I'm glad that you're sort of here with us today.
Thanks, great to be with you.
Yeah, I wanted to start off and just ask you a little bit about your background. How you ended up in the priesthood? What did that spiritual path look like?
Grew up Catholic family, military family, so we kind of bounced around from my early years. Dad left the active duty when I was 8, so in 1991 we relocated to Denver, Colorado, and that's been home ever since. So I tell people I grew up in Colorado, but actually not from Colorado, which is like a thing.
Are people like need to be from?
Oh yeah, to be a native, which actually nobody really is, which is just funny. But so Colorado's home. Grew up in a Catholic family. I would describe it as like good moral foundations, but as we were speaking about earlier today, just kind of an upbringing. Parents just kind of didn't know how to instruct and communicate the faith to us. So I really kind of fell away in my teenage years. And then in a moment of kind of desperation for my parents, they actually bribed me to go on a retreat.
Did they? Were you in public schools?
Public school.
Yeah.
We had shifted to a new parish that just had a really dynamic community youth group, and they were like, this is kind of like, we gotta, and it took. This is the last pitch, the Hail Mary pass. It was the Hail Mary pass, is exactly what it was, right before my senior year in high school, and I just totally caught fire and saw it. Met Christ, saw the beauty of the faith, and then went to seminary right afterwards.
Really? Right out of high school?
So I think they were a bit shocked by that one as well. So in seminary at 18, which was a 9-year process because I had to work on my undergraduate as I was going through. I was ordained at 27. And I've been a priest for almost 15 years.
Wow.
Some college ministry, some ministry at a Hispanic parish in the east side of Denver, moved to Rome for 4 years to a doctorate, and then worked at the seminary in teaching and other different roles, and then also doing some parish stuff as well.
Wow. When I taught, I've been teaching theology for over 20 years, and some of our best students came from really vibrant youth ministry programs. Like some come from the Catholic high schools, but like those connections and those friendships at those programs are really pretty amazing.
Yeah, late 90s, early 2000s, the Life Team, they're still going and they're still doing really good work, but it was like really, it was just this kind of force of momentum. Steubenville conferences, so for instance, the university was doing these conferences, and that kind of came together, but it was just, I just met some incredible people. Yeah. And community has always been a huge part of my journey in terms of just, I remember praying when I was 17, I was just like, I need friends who can support me in this, because I had to kind of divest myself of a past life and just a whole kind of culture with it. And so, that just provided that. It was an amazing experience.
Yeah, when I did a year of volunteer work after college, and one of the things that I encountered was, there's like other people like me, right? Yeah. It was just this moment where it's normal, it's like just I kind of fit, and that was like those relationships and those friendships are so important. Like they sustained me all the way through. And they're important in the moment. They're also like sustainable in a deeper way. I mean, I'm coming up on 25 years since that experience in July of 2001, and still have a lot of those friendships. Some who are really close, and we've been through it all together. We've been through the highs and the lows. So. It's amazing. Yeah, I find this, Aristotle has that distinction of friendship and his Nicomachean ethics, which is about like friendships of utility and pleasure and character. And I find that even today, like those little pieces help students think through their relationships, because they know those things. And not that the pleasure and utility ones are bad, but they just end. They can't endure. Like, your study partner in the class, that's great. Yeah, that's wonderful. But then once that breaks, if there's nothing else, the class is over, you're sort of done. Or the friends you have, they're fun to be with, but like it can't sustain the momentum of the ups and downs, or even the radical changes that happen like after graduation or when you change jobs.
Yeah, and I remember studying that text too, and being struck by the fact that they're all good.
Yeah.
They're just different goods, actually, that they correspond to, but understanding what they are.
Yeah. And then we don't, I think, take friendships seriously enough sometimes, and students, young people, my own kids, and even in my own life, like how important and valuable friendships are. And we know that like on an intuitive level, and I think Middle Ages, ancient world kind of knew that as well, and we oftentimes don't sort of value those things. The idea that you would make choices or have those enduring friendships that help you to guide your life is like less significant than like, I need to take a job with a
higher paycheck, and they move
Right.
across the country for that, but those sort of friendships. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
Right after high school, that also reminded me, one of my good friends, she's a Franciscan sister, and she tells the story that she knew at like 12 that she wanted to be a sister. And then she was like asking at 14, and they're like, you have to wait a little bit.
Wow.
And now she's in her 80s, and she's been a sister her whole life. She was like right on the cusp of all of these Vatican II changes, but just knew from a very early age. And it just strikes me is that you can have these experiences. Mine, I mean, I say I was a Catholic that converted to Catholicism,
Yeah.
but it was like a junior year in college, and that
Okay.
experience was really powerful. And those experiences can happen so young and still be so formative for
Yeah.
like 20 years out. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I had the same Catholic. I love how you say that, being a Catholic and converting to Catholicism, because that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
I did not have any sense of a call. I didn't know anything. I mean, I mean, I think my family's still shocked.
Yeah.
That I'm like the one
Even after all
guy.
these years, yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm not exaggerating. I think they actually just like. I think there are days where they're like, wow, like of all of them, this is
Yeah.
kind of crazy. So, but one of the things that was really beautiful about that conversion experience at 17 years old was kind of giving to the Lord all of the things that I loved, all of the desires of my heart. And one of those was the mountains and backcountry adventure. And what I discovered, and this is part of the whole book and the whole story, was you get it back with 100-fold, because it becomes an experience, an event of communion, instead of what it was for me, which was this individualistic pursuit of whatever, chasing the next experience or the next success or the next moment, which was so fleeting and empty. So it really was this whole kind of transformed thing with the way that friendship played out, but also with the things that we love that are in our heart.
Yeah, the two essays that were, or one essay and one thinker that was really important along those lines was, there was an essay by C.S. Lewis called The Weight of Glory, and it was this, and that what God's calling you to is to fuller life. Like the problem is this sort of satisfaction of things that are less than fully satisfying. And so the essay was about this, the weight of glory is the fullness of the things that God sort of calls us to. And then it was a passage, and I don't know if I can trace it down, but from Chesterton, which was like, God's not calling you to like seek first the kingdom so you don't need anything else, but seek first the kingdom and then all things will be given unto you. And that shifted my mentality of thinking this kind of austere, an austere kind of Christianity, as opposed to this sort of full and rich one. I was in Kentucky, so you got some of the tensions with the Christianity there that's a little bit more like anti sort of culture or suspicious of all those things. And what I found in the Catholicism was the both and that connected all those things. So it felt like everything became kind of richer in light of it.
Yeah.
This call.
I've always wanted to go on the Bourbon Trail in Kentucky.
Oh, yeah.
Big fan of what you guys are producing down there.
It is a good state.
Yeah.
I can't say enough good things about it. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
But very different than here and different than other places, and all of that's been a wonderful experience as well. I want to get to your sort of hiking in your book, but tell me a little bit about your graduate study. So like you're a priest, you want to sort of do that sort of ministry, you're interested in the outdoors, coming from sort of Denver, and then you go to Rome and hole up in a school for 4 years.
Yeah. It was.
How was that? Tell me about that. Tell me
Yeah, it
what
was
drove you, like the intellectual sort of interest,
Yeah,
but also
so-
that environment. It's very
so
different.
I'm a priest of Denver, and the Archbishop. I think it was a throwaway comment. Like one time, I was like, "But I love teaching. I love being in the classroom. That's where I feel." In many ways, that's kind of the heart of it all for me. My mom's a teacher, my sister's a teacher. Like, it's just, I come from a family of educators, and so it's always been in me. And so I've loved the intellectual life. I didn't read growing up, but I caught fire after my conversion and read. Just started to kind of anything I get my hands on. So I mentioned that one time, and then I think that it was like, yeah, we need a guy in what's called dogmatic theology or systematic theology, which you know because you studied. But basically just to join the department, but go get the doctorate.
Yeah.
I also said I'm terrible at languages. So I'm already in a Hispanic parish, and I'm giving these like kindergarten level homilies, and these poor people, they were very lovely and grateful, but I was like, wait, now you're going to ask me to go study, live in Italy. and I'm gonna have to learn French and German and all these stupid, crazy things. So,
Did that ever catch on? Because it never did for me.
no, it's just brutal. It was. I always knew it was a time and a period to kind of really go deeply, and so I appreciated the study. Living in Rome was an amazing experience. You kind of meet the whole world. I remember one time I was in a class and I was sitting at a table with some guys and we were just talking during the break. And I was with people from every continent except Antarctica. And we were just randomly
Really?
sitting together. So I'm talking to a guy from China, I'm talking to a guy from Nigeria, and what I realized in those years was I was like, wow, like I am so, like our little world of Denver, Colorado, and our concerns, and we think this is the church, and I worked with some guys from Myanmar who just living in a single party state for decades and are persecuted, and so it really kind of recontextualized my whole experience of the church. But it was also a grind. And I love the outdoors, and I really thrive with that touch point. Just like I was telling you, I was just skiing on Monday, and being locked in the middle of a huge, crazy city, it was tough.
Yeah.
But there was also you figure out how to there's these little hills, these beautiful, they're called the Castelli, these little villages up on the Alban Hills south of Rome, and I'd get on my bike on a Sunday morning and get out there, and the Italians would be walking around drinking their cappuccinos, and it was delightful. So it was a great experience. Doctorate's a brutalizing process, but you got to go through it. And then teaching's been a joy.
Yeah. There's I've talked to people sometimes about this, that they're like, oh, my room's never been cleaner, because anything's better than the doctor. My car's never been cleaner. I've never completed more TV shows. Like anything, you're sort of desperate sometimes for a relief from that as well.
Yeah.
It is. I've always, because I come from rural Kentucky too, and so it struck me is that like I'm in those rural environments, like, and it's rolling hills, and so you could just be out, and it was just kind of calm and peaceful. And I realized that when I went into the city, that was more like the journey in the wilderness, like of getting lost and disoriented, and that when I returned back to the rural place, it was much more sort of relaxing. And I know then we had students that came from like, say Miami or a really dense sort of city, and then when they got to the rural places, were like, oh, this is weird. Like, that's for them as the wilderness. So. Yeah.
Wendell Berry is one of my favorite authors from your neck of the woods, and I think he really describes that beautifully, how it all starts to encroach and change, and he catches the culture, and as it was, this is the agrarian life that our predecessors lived in. I was just thinking about, like, I'm just at that wonderful hotel you have me at near the Alamo. I was just like, what would it be like to live in the 1700s in the Alamo in August? It's like these guys were just, people just had an ability to endure hardship that I think is pretty hard to even conceive of right now.
It is astounding to me. So if you get a chance to see the mission churches, you're like, these things are built like several hundred years ago, just by like, there's like a priest, they go out and build a church, like not like hire the contractor or hire the company.
Start picking up rocks.
I know. And then we had that, I showed you that picture of like, as we were walking in, of like St. Louis Hall, when it's like this dirt road leading up to it. And so you're speaking of the Vincent Lynn, or the Lynn Great Speaker Series, and Vincent Lynn is one of the donors, and he says when he showed up here, he like showed up, but he was like here for the program, the engineering program, and he walked around the building, he's like, where's the rest of the campus?
It's just the building.
It was just the building, and so you kind of like forget how the changes in the density and what it would be like without all of these, I don't know if amenities is the right word, but all of these different ways in which we live.
They also lived attuned to creation, which I think just cultivates the humanity. That's one of the things that I've really been interested in. When I was in Boulder, Colorado as a chaplain, which is where, that was kind of a moment of convergence where it was like, I love to climb peaks and ski and backpack and do all these things, but now it's like, I created this outdoor club that was kind of an extension of the campus ministry, and it was really specifically to get a forum where kids who just were not interested at all in the church could just come and we could just get together. And it was an amazing experience, because you just share life on the trail and they realize, oh, he's a priest, but he's just a normal guy, or these, it's just like we're just sharing life together. But one of the experiences also was get to a place where the phones don't work which is getting harder to do now.
Yeah, it's.
But
yeah.
back in, this is 15 years ago. So we'd go up to these little huts that the 10th Mountain Division trained in for World War II. This is up in the Rocky Mountains, and you can still rent them out. And actually, it's kind of cool. 15 years later, I still do a trip with some of those students every year over New Year's. Now they're all married and have kids, and so it's been a really amazing experience. But that was like, we got to get back to that kind of life where you're living in communion with nature and with each other and with God in such a way that you kind of rediscover your humanity.
Yeah, I grew up in the 70s, so I love Star Wars, but I've always loved tech. But I can feel that kind of the corrosion of my attention so often, and I even and I'm somebody who reads a lot and pays attention a lot, and that your theme about like trying to pay attention to to nature and the rhythms of it, that's so significant. I feel like because everything's reaching out for to look this way and look that way, and I find it like even when you're resisting it, it's sometimes hard to look away, and you have to really kind of steel your will to do this, and you can't do that for very long. And that's, I think, maybe the point of needing the connections and the friendships and the community that sort of does that. Like when you've got your friends over, a lot of times it's so much easier to put your phone away because you're like wanting to talk to the people that
Absolutely.
are there. How did you first get interested in the outdoors? So go back before you started the outdoor club. Like, where did that come from?
Yeah, so I grew up, my mom's from Minnesota. So hockey was our kind of family stated religion. I got skates when I was born, and that was like, my dad's from Montana, grew up on a farm in Montana. Mom's from Minnesota. They met in Germany. They were serving in the military. But hockey was our life. So we were not skiing in Vail. We were traveling to Fargo, North Dakota for hockey tournaments. In January, I'm like, oh, my poor parents, this is just, I cannot believe what we made them do. So when I got into high school, I just met some guys that were really outdoorsy, and it just took. My brother was an Eagle Scout, and my dad is an Army Ranger, so we had some experiences. But that's when I really kind of went for it.
Did you do Scouts?
I did, but as a kid, like you just kind of stop getting signed up at one point, like when you're 10. But my brother didn't, and he's an Eagle Scout, so.
I asked because my older son is an Eagle Scout.
Okay.
My younger son was like, he was done. Like after the Pinewood Derbies, he was like, I'm out. And then another friend of mine, he like did Cub Scouts. I'm like, well, how'd you get Cub Scouts? He said, well, after school they had cookies. So I got cookies. Then I was a Cub Scout. That's where I had a lot of my, because I was a Scout too, I had a lot of my experiences because I had the community and the friends and was sort of outdoors. But
so I would say my earliest experiences were my dad taking me with my brother on the Scout trips.
Gotcha.
And so you're camping, you're backpacking, you're hiking. That was the kind of initial thing, and then it kind of made it my own. I would say like 8th grade, 9th grade, and then just completely went for it. And the biggest thing that started was I fell in love with climbing the high peaks of Colorado, which are called 14ers. So there's 54 peaks that are above 14,000 feet. And they're all situated in about a 30, 40 mile radius, most of them are. And so it's kind of the rooftop of the Rockies right there in the center. And I decided that I was going to climb them all. So that's when I started. But then people wanted to join, and it just became kind of this thing. So I did that through my 20s, which was really.
Yeah. Is that where you started to make those connections between spirituality and hiking?
Yeah. So it's like we're climbing 14, and a lot of these are like really remote. So you're backpacking. It's multiple days. And then I was in seminary, and I was doing in philosophy and theology studies, and that's when I started to kind of really be like, how do I kind of put these two together? Because I wasn't reading a lot of people that were doing it. It was kind of like, and I talk about this in the book, of like you have like outdoor adventure books, and then you have like theology books, but it's like, how do these kind of come together? And so then I got really focused on a couple of theologians who I just fell in love with, who I felt like had they were right there kind of giving me the language, the framework, and then it was just like, go live it. And then I was ordained at 27, and then I was like, well, now I got to say Mass on top of all of them. So I started over and did that through my 30s. And so that has been kind of a lot of the trajectory. There's been all kinds of different things, but that would be if I was going to if there was a thread, it was kind of thinking and praying in conversation and sharing life on these peaks, on these climbs, and then now you're preaching. And now you're taking college kids, and now you're doing these
Yeah.
things. And so it's starting to kind of shift.
Yeah, and that seemed like one of the things that came out in your book, too, was that it also seemed to attract people to it. I mean, that was an interesting piece to this. I remember when I was in grad school, I asked one of our classmates who was a priest, I'm like, well, how did you determine to become a priest? Like, oh, people came to me as if I was a priest. And he was like discerning out of this sense, like, I mean, clearly he had like this kind of, deep commitment to the faith and a deep commitment to the church, and then was like doing things, and then people kind of like moved to him in that sort of direction, and out of that he sort of saw God's call.
Yeah.
So like when you were talking about like the you invite people, but people come along, and you carry this out for sort of over time.
Yeah.
So I was like curious about that dimension of that spirituality too, that seems to attract people, like people from faith, like you talked about the nuns that you were sort of hiking up, but also like people that didn't seem to have a place outside, within the church as well, a place to sort of talk about spirituality. So.
Yeah, my experience was, when I was in my 20s, like, it was actually just the relationships and the conversations that actually formed me. I was studying theology, but I wasn't like just this guru who kind of like had it all together. I was just kind of like, I just enjoyed being with people in the mountains more than anything. And it was like these conversations. We'd sit by the fire at night and just talking through stuff, and you'd never thought about this stuff before. And so that just kind of developed and deepened over the years. So I really feel like my whole intellectual life as a Christian was born out of just friendship. Like I'm not just this kind of autodidactic kind of genius but I just spent a lot of time with really interesting people in really beautiful places, and and then all of a sudden you start to kind of give more and more. And the other thing I would say to the college kids that I was working with, my experience was, like, a lot of people don't leave the church, they just kind of fall out of it.
Yeah.
Like, there's actually, some people do, and there's real pain, and there's, injustice and things. But a lot of people, it's just kind of like, it just kind of fell out. And you can do a lot with that if you have the right kind of human approach to it, I think.
Yeah.
And you kind of can propose things in a way that is just like, yeah, hey. But when you're in a relationship, you can do so much more.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I was reading, Christian Smith just had a book out, and it was called, I'm going to blank on the name of the word, but this was his argument, is that you do have a portion of people that are highly committed to the faith, and you have a portion of people that are really opposed to the faith. But then most of the people, obsolete. This is what I call it. Like, in the structures of sort of modern life, it just doesn't kind of fit in with lots of people's lives. And then I was talking to students on campus, wonderful students, Catholic students. Their family was Catholic. When they go home, they go to Mass with their sort of family, but here they're like, oh no, this costs a lot. I got to get my degree. I got to get a job. And so like the pace, like they could go, but like, and they want to go, but like, oh, I got to get the paper done. And so that what you were saying, like, kind of fall out. It like just doesn't seem to fit into how life is sort of structured.
Yeah.
And I see this too, like with my own. You talk about hockey, which made me think of my youngest son, who's on these soccer travel teams. And, and you're like, oh yeah, we're playing on Sunday morning, and Saturday, and you're like, okay, all right. Like, and you just. There's no structures in place that would sort of make it easy to sort of do with that. And then if there is time, it gets filled in with something else very quickly. Yeah. So, but there's not a resentment there with that group of students. They're like, oh no, I like it. I think it's good. Jesus is nice. And and I think there's potential there.
Yeah. It's kind of just it's just not maybe like a top priority. Like, I got my top 5, and I have time for 4 of them, and this is maybe number 8.
Yeah.
And it's a nice thing. And should definitely be there at Christmas. And so I just think that we have to kind of shift. And also, like, when you live in relationship with creation really deeply, I think that not only does God speak through creation, through being, like in a different kind of way, but St. Augustine talks about this, the 2 different books, the book of nature and the book of Scripture, and this is God speaks, but also like this dichotomy that the church is against the world and the world against the church. And certainly, like in John's gospel, he speaks about the world, but he's speaking about that very specifically. And I think that it helps when you're just like, you just get on the trail with people and you just share life, and there's not this kind of like, they're the enemy, they're not practicing, they're the problem, and we kind of fortify the church. And I feel like sometimes we play into that, and it doesn't do us any good. Because the world's not the enemy. God loves the world, and so we have to kind of understand ourselves in a different way.
I remember a speaker one time that talked about the different understandings of the world and Scripture, and this was part of what she was sort of making this argument, like the world's not against God, like in all this creation, but then sometimes it's used like the world as this sort of opposition, and so she had this wonderful kind of typology of the different ways in which the world is sort of used, and but part of that was try to get away from this like church versus world kind of pieces, but sometimes when that world is a stand-in for like a certain set of norms and principles that are opposed to the things that the church is, and we label that the world, but that's not really what we're sort of meaning or talking about. This one.
Yeah, cosmos is created and it's good, and when we live in relationship, that it's this symphony of being that is just speaking, and it's radiating truth, goodness, and beauty, and it's just, and when you feel that, like that's, and again, kind of the world of concrete and glass and the urban life. This is back to like Wendell Berry. It's like when you live in tune with that, with really the created being, with the givenness of things, and not the world of artificiality. Man, God feels intimately, he awakens us and awakens our humanity. And a lot of times what I saw in the students was that's where it started, and then you start to work into the conversation to, well, how do you get to like Catholic Church 2,000 years after Christ? We'll get there, but just like, the reality of being,
that experience.
Something is happening here, something is living here, so.
When, was for the people that that came with you on the trails, was it the conversation? I guess was it the conversations? Was it the experience of the outdoors? Was it the experience of the outdoors that kind of the driving force behind this? Like what was the first mover in those kinds of encounters with people?
So
maybe that's oversimplifying it too.
Yeah, I was a driver, so that's my personality. It's actually really funny. I tell seminarians, my first week in seminary. It was like my first meeting, formation meeting, and the guy says to me, give me a word that would describe who you are. And I was like, I'm super laid back. And he looks at me and he goes, I've known you for like 5 minutes, but you seem like you're really intense. And I was like, what? Because I had created this idea that I was like this laid back Colorado mountain guy, and I'm not. I'm like driving to climb all these peaks, and it was so I just remind them that like maybe you don't have as much self-knowledge as you think, because I definitely did not. But yeah, so I would kind of pull people together, and then they'd bring people in. So I'd say a lot of my 20s was spent doing adventures with just kind of friends, some who were in ministry, some were, we kind of had a group of people that kind of came out of that youth group that a lot of them went to college. My brother was a big part of it. And they were kind of moving into marriage. Some became religious, some became priests. And then from 27 on, it was like, now I'm a chaplain and I'm kind of sharing life and accompanying this. And John Paul II had a group of people he called the Środowisko that really always inspired me, just kind of shared life with them all the way through. And I always thought, wow, that's like really amazing to, not just like I'm here now and I'm your chaplain and then I go, but just to kind of, but then the Hallmark trip, which the book To Heights and Unto Depths was written as a way to pull the whole thing together, was in the summer of 2022. I did a through hike of the Colorado Trail, and it took a month, 486 miles, 90,000 feet up, 90,000 feet down, traversing 7 different mountain ranges. You go right through the Rockies, kind of west and then southwest, and you end in a town called Durango, and that's kind of the end of the trail. And so I took that occasion to be like, we had a year of preparation for that trip, and I was kind of like, I think this is the opportunity to really start pulling together all of these little talks, conferences, homilies, book ideas that I've just been collecting fragments for 20 years, gleaning things from great authors and ideas and people who are who formed me, and then kind of pulled it into a travel narrative where I'm like, I'm going to tell the story and tell other stories as we kind of hike through the Rockies. But also there's a theological thing, spiritual thing to unpack in each chapter. I wrote them as in a letter form, because one of the books that really influenced me early on was Romano Guardini's Letters from Lake Como, which the story there is he returns back to his childhood home, which was his village outside of Lake Como, Italy in the north. And this is 100 years ago. He published it in 1925. So this is like in the early 1900s. and the Industrial Revolution had really come into that area, and he was just he was lamenting and reflecting over the beauty of that alpine Dolomite world and how it had changed with the advent of the machines and the creation of, now there's a power plant next to these beautiful lakes and that kind of thing. So that was the idea. He was writing letters, and I was like, I think I'm going to do that same kind of epistolary style.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah, it reminded me, just when you're talking about Guardini, in Appalachia, you'll have these like through roads that are really, made for cars, and along them you have all the strip malls and all the chain restaurants and stuff, and that can very much look like that's what Appalachia is, like this kind of like American kitsch, for miles and miles and miles, and then that you kind of step off that main road like a mile or a half mile, and then you're back into these sort of untouched terrains. I'm sure at some point it'll kind of develop, but because the Appalachian region is so economically depressed, you don't have that development. You still are able to sort of recover some of those pieces that are out there.
I gave a talk in Steubenville, Ohio, and I was going to Washington, D.C. to see a friend, and I took a very long back road because I wanted to get off the beaten path. I didn't want to stay on the highways. And it is magnificent, beautiful.
Yeah. Say a little bit more about the other authors that you found helped you to put these pieces together that spoke to the people that were sort of on the trail.
Yeah. So
some of the more prominent.
So I would say there was 5 that for this book, To Heights and Unto Depths, that I really tried to kind of pull together. Originally, I was going to focus on Romano Guardini, and a publishing friend of mine was like, bring some of these other guys into the conversation. And so I'm pulling from all over the place, but the 5 that I think really helped me, what I would call like a theology of creation, like a real sense of like, how do we understand what creatureliness is, and how do we recover that sense of what we are? So Romano Guardini, Hans Urs von Balthasar, who's a Swiss theologian, who was actually kind of a student of Guardini's, Joseph Ratzinger, who became Pope Benedict XVI, has some really interesting stuff on that. Dietrich von Hildebrand, another German, and then Luigi Cesani, who is an Italian priest who founded Community Liberation, which is an international movement. And those were kind of the 5 that I showcased, I would say, throughout the book. And one of the reasons I wrote the book was to help. I wanted it to be like one of the most exciting things about being down here is you had students like reading it on an adventure up in Big Bend, and I was like, that's exactly why I wrote it. So because they're not going to be able to take Ratzinger and Guardini, they're going to study that in your classes. But if I can kind of synthesize it, break it down for them, tie it into some stories, and it's helpful along the journey, that's the goal.
Yeah, it's always the way in. I feel like I had to learn this in my teaching, right? That you kind of need to show. The students need to see the thing and, of course, see the value first almost before they engage it. And I told you before that I do like the marriage class and this other class on work and economics. But the point of those classes is like, the reason why they work is because students see immediately why this is important, because they care about marriage or care about their job. So like I'm talking about, say, communication, for example, which it could be a really boring, dull topic, but like, if you can show them like why is it that this matters so much for this relationship and for love itself, then they're like really invested in like social science studies and random essays and all of these sort of thinkers, and that's the kind of entryway into the sort of deeper exploration of those things. But oftentimes we try to like start with the back end with all the density and not like the sense that it's really the value that is the kind of pragmatic value that they have there, or the spiritual value to that.
I read recently that the studies have shown that the prefrontal cortex fires when stories are told.
Yeah.
So there's actually a narrative elicits the most rational part of the human, which is really interesting to think about, because we think like, oh, kids love story, but like when I'm preaching at the pulpit, like I can see like if you can't just dive into content, and because we're just not content machines, we can't just kind of dump it in. And even as you're talking about content, I gotta every once in a while kind of just pop something in there that kind of you can literally see it firing. It's like, oh, okay, we're back.
Yeah, because you can't hold on to it if you don't have that narrative structure. It's like, two things, which is so some of the work I do is on statistics, and which I find interesting. But one of my friends was like, "Oh, like, yeah, the numbers fine, but you got to figure out what's the story, the number that they're telling you. That's the thing, and that'll help people do that. And if you get the story right and tell the story, then the numbers become interesting. But by themselves, like if readers are like, they just kind of gloss over their sort of eyes. But what is it that it matters, and what's the narrative that's there? And then a few weeks ago, one of our previous speakers, she was talking. We had her talk on children's books and reading and faith, and it was this wonderful sort of discussion about how reading, especially in a community or in a family, like fosters attention, which is linked to prayer and these connections between reading and faith. But one of the things that she said was that reading and narrative and story, people start to disengage when they start to get tested on it in school, so like around 5th grade. And that's the kind of piece, like when you start to somehow, like it gets to be quantified in a way, we kind of lose the connections to it and the ability to sort of hold pieces together.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Anyways, I thought that was, I guess part of my interest in that too is part of my faith came from reading books like Graham Greene's The Power and the Glory, Shizuko Indo's Silence, Flannery O'Connor's short stories, like just a series of like narrative books that were so instrumental in my life. And then going into theology, like systematics can be a lot more sort of precision oriented, and then trying then to connect with those experiences, the narratives that I have, the stories I had growing up, the stories of the people sort of in the church, and trying to make sense of that as real and sort of meaningful was the foundation with which I entered into the deeper theology.
Yeah.
So I think that the stories are right.
I was so big on this teaching in the seminary, and I never read literature really in seminary, and I was just kind of pounding through theological books, and I loved it. But you get, like Newman describes literature as the autobiography of humanity, and I love that. And one of the things I realized,
that's a great term.
I think I was like 27, and I was like, I've never read Homer. Like I'm reading Balthazar talk about Homer, but I've never read Homer. I was like, and it literally was like I was sitting with a group of priest friends, and I was like, has anybody read Homer? And we're like, we should read it. So we sat down and read the Iliad, read the Odyssey together, and then that really kicked off this whole thing. So what I would do in seminary, some guys loved this, some guys hated this, but for my term paper, I would just say, take an idea from the course and draw it into a conversation with a piece of literature.
Oh, wow.
And I don't care. I just want to see creativity.
Yeah.
But they're so conditioned to it has to be precision and has to be kind of, we have to replicate and reproduce exactly the content that you've told us. I was like, that's not what this exercise is, because what we're setting you up to do is you're dealing with human beings constantly and you're teaching, so that narrative has to kind of flow into everything. You really should never give a talk or a homily or anything, I think, without what Aristotle called that ethos as the appeal, where you engage and elicit the humanity.
When this was, so coming out of Kentucky, coming out of sort of undergrad and heading into grad school and doing theology, like I wanted that precision. I was looking for those sort of pieces. But then you run into the Gospels and you run into like, oh, this is not, you got 4 Gospels here, and they've got different kind of, I mean, it's all the same story, but they're speaking to different audiences and emphasizing sort of different things and written in different kind of contexts and trying to make sense of those pieces. And then when I started to look at those and more that kind of, those narrative pieces, what is the story that's being told there? Like, and somehow they became more true for me in that sort of sense. I could make sense of, I loved Mark. Mark was sort of the favorite one. I think initially because it was the shortest of them as all, but like this sort of urgency and pace of that sort of story coming up, and then the stark reality at the very end, and then almost in the addition of like extra endings on there to make sure like, oh no, like to try to fit it in with us. All of that, I loved all of those sort of pieces, but there was something about that insight that I had that enabled everything else to make, the systematics is a way to help us think clearly about this, but this narrative piece is a little bit more way to sort of draw people in.
And there's something magnificent about the systematic and the clarity and the proportion and the beauty. When you see truths and we probe so deeply into these things, there's something immensely fulfilling in that. But it has to really be interiorized into the humanity, otherwise it just becomes kind of this system. and God is not a system.
Yeah.
Reality is not a system.
No, back to your sort of your hike and your pilgrimage. Right, is what I think of it as. But also, right, like you plan for a year, but when you get on the trail, it's always a little.
Yeah.
It's never the system.
Yeah. Yeah, I tell guys before we go on these adventures, I was like, no great story ever started with we drank an NA beer and everything went perfectly to plan. So just remember that. Like it's going to be, the adventure begins precisely when something changes. And there are things, there's just a precariousness to the backcountry, which you really have to reverence and you really have to be careful. I mean, I was backcountry skiing a couple weeks ago, and there are deaths every year in Colorado from people who are taking undue risks, and there's always risk, but you have to understand kind of what you're doing in light of that, to not be reckless, but also to enjoy it, to love the adventure and to pursue it. And it really was. The weather, one of the things that really created a great dimension of the story, when we were on the Colorado Trail, I found 3 guys who were crazy enough to do this with me. And I met them, and I pretty instinctively knew they were the guys.
Yeah.
And I talk about them in the book. So I had 3 fellow, what I call through hikers. So they did the whole thing in one go, 30 days. But I also was like, I feel like this is also an opportunity to get as many young guys onto the trail as we can. And I talk in the book why I limited it to guys. There were some specific reasons for that, because every other trip I've ever done has been men and women. But with this one in particular, it was like we gotta get young guys on the trail, because a lot of these guys have never had experience of doing hard things. Just doing hard things, and the joy and the experience of communion that happens when you do hard things together.
Yeah.
That's what we want to admit. When you suffer together, and so I was like, the trail was basically broken into 4 or 5 day sections. So we'd carry all of our food and everything for about 4 days, and then we'd get to a road. We had a bin that somebody would bring up.
Yeah.
We would kind of reset, get the food, go into town, get a nice meal, and then back on the trail. So for those sections, I just invited friends who were young priests, youth ministers. I was like, just bring guys. And I told them, I was like, this is serious stuff. We're averaging 17 miles a day. We're putting in about 3,000 vertical feet a day. We are going over mountains, and you're carrying a pack. This is serious. And some of them were dialed in and ready to go, and they crushed it. And others were it was disastrous. like this one guy, he's now a good friend, but we're like a quarter mile in, and he takes off his terrible boots from Walmart or wherever he got, and he had blisters all over his foot. And I was like, but he did it. He rolled through the next 4 days, and I was like, wow. So I talk about those stories, and so that was a good experience of not just creating the opportunity for the guys, but I also think that if the 4 of us would have just gone and just hammered this thing, because these guys, the guys that I did it with, are really exceptional athletes. Like one was a college football player from Texas. Another guy did 2 tours in Afghanistan, Army Ranger. So these guys are like serious.
Knew what they were getting into.
What kind of story is that if you just kind of we went out and crushed the Colorado Trail? That's not that interesting. But when you hear stories about, you got these guys who were 17 and all they did was play video games for the last year, and then you come out, and then what they experience in 3-4 days together. That's what made it really. So it was a huge grace.
It made me think of something in parenting, but I think it's true for sort of life. Like you can't have too much precarity, and you can't be too protected, right? Like both of those things, too much and you're like overwhelmed and you're panic all the time, you can't sort of manage. But then on the other hand, if you're protected all the time, like there's no risks, there's no sense of agency, there's no sense of like, I can take this upon my sort of self. So you need to have that kind of middle ground where there's like kind of freedom to like really like, ooh, that didn't go well, but not so catastrophic that you're gonna be bad. But as parent trying to manage this, like, okay, like what can we let go of that you need to do yourself, that it will be bad if it doesn't go well, but also like not so bad that it's there. So provide enough, and I feel like that's kind of life, like especially that when you're growing and developing, that trying to balance out the what's a reasonable risk to take is really key.
And life in the 70s and 80s was much more.
It was a little more, free for all.
Yeah, just kind of like, all right, we'll come back for dinner at some point, you know.
It's crazy to think about, isn't it?
Oh,
Sometimes,
crazy.
yeah. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah. It's getting dark outside. I should go home.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I lived in this beautiful, idyllic almost neighborhood, but like. One family had a bell. That was when my family had a whistle. One other family, like you just had these signals, like, oh, it's time to go home.
Yeah.
And you were just kind of on your own, exploring everything.
Yeah.
So it was a different, and trying to foster that. It's hard now to foster that because everybody's kind of a little bit more programmed and a little bit.
Well,
more tuned
and
in.
I think, like, I was at a friend's house and they have high school kids your age, and they have this. They have their Find My Friends or whatever, the
Oh yeah, fine. Yeah,
something 360, I don't even know.
Yeah,
what it's
yeah.
called.
There was like a bunch of apps, but yeah, the three.
Where they know where they are at all times.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, are your teenagers okay with this? They're like, oh, they love it. They want us. And I was like, I would never, ever have wanted my parents to have a location device locked on me, ever.
So the funny thing with us is that our kids insist that they can track us. Which it's not, they're such good kids, but they're like, well, when are they picking me up? Like, I want to see where I am on the sort of route. Or, what are you doing at work today?
Yeah.
So it's funny. They've got this kind of reverse thing.
That is funny.
We again, I think if we had a different relationship, it might sort of change. But it's hilarious. Because my
That's funny.
daughter's, she's out of college working. She's in Pittsburgh, and she'll like check in, like, what are you doing?
Oh, yeah. No, it's just so funny. It's a different world. But I do think that, like, that we're constantly in need to kind of recalibrate, like, okay, how do we hit that? I like how you describe it, between precariousness and protection, where it's like, it's safe, but things are a little kind of dangerous. Like, there's some risk here, and that's, I think, where we thrive. And I think one of the things that I learned when I was in seminary formation, I was really interested in, like, how do I inspire guys to live an authentic humanity? Because John Paul II talks about the humanity as the bridge. So I want guys who are deeply human in the sense that, grace has transformed their nature, but also that there's a naturalness to their being, that they're deeply relatable. And they might be introverted and they might be whatever, and that's fine, but like you feel at ease when you're with them. I think that's one of the qualities we need in priests right now, is just like they can be really in any situation. That there's a self-possession, there's a kind of awareness and attentiveness to persons, basic kindness, like the things that sometimes we forget, but also active.
Yeah.
And this was a big thing for me, and I had a number of these guys come on the Carla Trail and had done different ski trips and things with them, because the body under tension is healthy.
Yeah.
And when the body is not active, when it's not doing anything, it actually atrophies. And I think the same thing is with relationships. So like a family, you got to live in the tension a little bit between these things. If it's too stagnant on either side, or it's just too out of control, you're actually not living in the tension.
Yeah, it's like the opposite of that thing, like when you use clothes or things, like the more you use them, the more they sort of wear out. And the body and relationships are the opposite, right? Like the less you use them, the more they atrophy.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I'm going to use that to springboard to my sort of last question, because we talked both about like the 70s and 80s and how things sort of change, and the challenges of sort of phones, the need to sort of authenticity, and the sort of the challenges sort of going forward there as well. And so always my last question is kind of thinking about like what do you see as the future of, I usually do make it specific, the future of Catholic higher education, but if you're going to broaden it out and talk about like the future of Catholicism in the United States, like what are your sort of hopes and dreams? What are the things that you sort of fret about? What are the things that you hope gets better? So.
Yeah, I think that what this book became, which is a lead into the answer of your question, was really a study of the incarnation. And I think that what I discovered was like, this is really the heart of it all. Is God becomes man, but in Christ we have the unity of creation, humanity, and God. They're all right there together. And I think that one of the things I'd love to see is and I can really only speak from like Denver. There's a deep love, fidelity to the church. There's an orthodoxy. There's a faithfulness to it. But I think the future has to be that can be lived out in a deeply human way.
Yeah.
because I just think that the church will not be attractive unless humanity is seen as really being authenticated in Christ. And so it's not just enough to kind of have certain values and kind of proposals and have clarity and all these things.
And
That's
the right
fine.
system.
The right system. That's all important. Like orthodoxy matters, but it's charity. It's love, and it's the way that love transforms humanity. And so I think we're in a really exciting time. I think it's also going to get crazy. I think in the next few decades, I think that we're just in such a unique kind of sociological moment here. The demographics are changing. We get all these kind of alarming reports and things, but the reality of the fact is that we have an institution that grew out of a need, and the need is not present to support the institutional structures anymore. So we're going to have to really get creative, and I think there's going to be a lot of catalyzing of the institutional dimension of the church, and I think that that's the work of the Holy Spirit. I think that the charismatic and the institution are constantly at play. We've seen this. You study history and you see this is just another kind of season where it's going through. So I think I think parish life is going to look different. I think school life is going to look different. But I also think that we don't have to panic and be like institutions are going to be gone. It's just I think that it's going to transform in a deep way.
That's interesting, because one of the mantras that I keep telling people is like, oh, higher ed's changing, right?
Yeah.
We don't have answers. We don't know what's
Yeah.
going on, and so, but then trying to like kind of offset this, like it doesn't mean catastrophe. Like
Yeah.
it means like, oh, these things that worked in the past, they're no longer working,
Yeah.
and kind of think out. And then the deeper piece, which I really appreciated in that answer, was there's a need here, right? And so how do we sort of respond to that? And
Yeah.
that sort of drives the changes that are there. And it's not I don't want to sound too absolute in this, but it's hard to determine that a priori, like, oh, here's the correct structure that you've got. It kind of emerges out from the
Yeah.
response and the relationships that you have. And then when it works, you're like, oh, there it is. Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be like, I think, and we could go into this for way too long, but it's not this kind of like, the institutions are the problem. The institutions are not, but the institutions are concretizations of a way of life. And
Yeah.
so if the way of life, if the culture is no longer the kind of life and the soul of the institution, then we have to rebuild the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And we do that by just literally getting people back together. So I'll give you an example. I work at a parish called Our Lady of Lourdes, which is right outside of Denver University, in the south side of the city. A lot of young adults there. Very secular neighborhood. The parish, about 15 years ago, had really kind of atrophied and collapsed. It was on the brink of being closed. My buddy and classmate came in, and he and I have worked together for a number of years, and we basically were like, let's just figure out where the touch points are, and let's start going. And what we found was that a lot of people wanted to do marriage prep, but they weren't coming to Mass because they didn't know how to get back to the church.
Yeah.
So we just started meeting people, and oftentimes that meant you go to Denver Beer Co. and have an IPA together, and then you start talking about it, and you kind of work your way back in, or you have a cup of coffee here, or you go climb a 14er together. And so the institution still exists, the parish exists, but the priest is not going to sit at the parish and just crank out sacraments all the time.
Yeah.
We exist, we love the sacraments, but we can't presume that just sacramentalizing the next generation is going to produce the fruit that we want, which is human beings flourishing in Christ. So we just got to get creative. And that's kind of how I think about it. It's like my day-to-day looks really different because I got to be out.
Yeah.
I got to be out, and I love it. I find that to be exhilarating and life-giving, but I also want to bring them into the community. So,
That's wonderful.
yeah.
That's a great place to end. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Good.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.